A very good morning, students. Now, this is a video on the lymphatic system. We have just completed the cardiovascular system or the blood vascular system, okay, in which we have learned about the capillaries, okay. The capillaries absorbs the tissue fluid and then it drains into the venous system. But then whatsoever tissue fluid is not absorbed, okay, by the capillaries, that is absorbed by the lymphatics or lymph capillaries. Thus the lymphatic system, as we will see, that it act as an assistant or secondary or auxiliary system to that of the venous system. So I am passing to the next slide. Here, if you see the capillary here, and in this capillary, in this first diagram on the top, you can see where I am moving this pointer. This is the arterial end of the venous, arterial end, where the terminal or meta-arteriole is present here, which breaks up into the arterial end of the capillaries, and the other end, which is shown in the blue, is the venous end of the capillary. And as you know that capillaries are present throughout the body except in few tissues, okay, capillaries are everywhere, and thus there takes place the exchange of the nutrients and metabolites and the gaseous uh, products here into the capillaries. That means oxygen is given out to the tissues, carbon dioxide is taken, and then the waste product they are taken in, okay. The water is transduted here into the structures in the tissue fluid. So these capillaries are present here in the intercellular space of our body everywhere, as I said, okay. And these intercellular spaces between the cell, they are filled with the tissue fluid, okay. They are filled with the tissue fluids, and this tissue fluid, which here in the second diagram you see here, the tissue, where the tissue is shown, which is nothing but the collection of the cells. In between the cells, whatsoever is space is present, it is called as the intercellular space. And in this intercellular space, okay, there is the presence of the fluid which is called as the tissue fluid. Now this tissue fluid is formed because of the filtration of blood through these capillaries, okay, arterial end of the capillaries, okay. After the exchange of the gas and the metabolites and the nutrient, this tissue fluid is absorbed back through the capillary end of the blood vessels, okay, capillary, which is shown here in the blue one. So almost up to 90% of the tissue fluid which is present here in the intercellular space is absorbed back by the capillaries, okay, venous end of the capillaries, and it goes inside the venous system, ultimately reaches to the heart. But there are about 10% or 15% of the tissue fluid which is present in this intercellular tissues, okay, spaces, is not absorbed by the capillaries. So this 10 to 15% of the tissue fluid, okay, then enters into the lymph capillary. In this diagram you can see here in the green color are the lymph capillaries are present here, okay, in the intercellular space, and the remaining 10 to 15% of the tissue fluid is absorbed by, which was not absorbed by the capillary. Venous end of the capillary will be absorbed, these capillaries of the lymph vessels, okay, capillaries of the lymph vessels. So I am passing to the next slide, where you will see that why this is not absorbed. The remaining 10 to 15% of tissue fluid is not absorbed by that of the capillaries, blood capillaries. Now, the remaining tissue fluid, though which is reabsorbed by the lymph capillaries, it contains the large molecules of protein, fat droplets, bacteria, cancer cells, okay. So the that portion of the tissue fluid which was not absorbed by the blood capillary, and it was not absorbed by the blood capillary. The reason was that there were the large molecules, and large molecules cannot pass through the endothelial lining of the blood capillary, and that's why it is taken up by the lymph capillary. What does it mean? It means that both the lymph capillaries and blood capillaries, they are present in the tissue fluid everywhere in the bodies. Okay, so what is not absorbed by the blood capillary is ultimately absorbed by the lymph capillaries. Okay, because the mechanism of the absorption in the lymph capillary is different than the mechanism of the absorption in the blood capillaries. Okay, now the lymph capillary, if you will see, and I will show you in the next diagram, it is the blind-ended structure. Here you can see that this green color capillaries, okay, they are having the blind end, not similar to that of the blood capillaries, which has an arterial end and the other end was the venous end. Here it begins within the tissue fluid. The lymph capillary, they begin because they are blind ended. Okay, now this lymph capillaries, they then into the small vessel, lymph vessel, and this small lymph vessels which begins from the capillary, lymph capillary, they are called as the lymphatics or small lymph vessel. The small lymph vessels, they will join to each other as you see in this diagram and will form the medium sized lymph vessels. Okay, lymphatics. Okay, and then this lymph passes through the a bean-shaped structure which is a lymphoid organ, encapsulated lymphoid organ, and it is called as the lymph node. So what is passing through this lymph capillaries, through the lymph vessels? Okay, this is called as the lymph. This, so what is lymph? Lymph is nothing but it is the tissue fluid which was not absorbed by the blood capillaries. Hence whatsoever has been absorbed by the lymph capillaries, that is the lymph. Okay, so that is the lymph. So thus this lymph then will pass through the lymph node. Pass through means it will be actually, in layman terms, will be filtered through this. That means the lymph node act as a filter station for the lymph which is passing through these lymph vessels, okay, or lymphatics. And thus this, what is filter here? The lymph nodes has the capability to identify any foreign tissues or anything foreign to the body. So there may be bacteria, there may be cancer cell, there may be virus that can be identified by the lymph nodes. Similarly, the lymph node other function is to produce the lymphocyte, which is important defense, which plays an important role in the defense mechanism of body. So the lymph node is as organ of the immune system or our defense system of body. After passing through 2 or 3 sets, I have shown only one set of the lymph node here. After passing through 2 or 3 lymph node, then this ultimately the lymph will form a large lymph vessel which is called as the lymph trunk, and then the lymph which is flowing in the large lymph vessel will open into the large veins at the root of the neck on right side as well as onto the left side. Okay. So this lymphatic system consists of the lymph vessels which begins in the tissue space and it drains the lymph, and ultimately this lymph goes and finally drain into the great veins at the root of the neck. Thus this is, as I said in the beginning of this video, that the lymphatic system is nothing but an auxiliary or a assistant system to that of the venous drainage. Whatsoever lymph tissue which cannot be drained by the by the blood capillary has to be drained by another system, but it ultimately drains into the blood. Okay, so whatsoever lymph is drained from the various tissues ultimately goes and mix into the lymph. Now, in this last slide on this introductory video of the lymphatic system, okay, we just learn what are the components of the lymphatic system, the parts of the lymphatic system. I will let you know. Okay, here what you will see here in this lymphatic system, it consists of number one component is the lymph. What I have just told you about the lymph is nothing but the intercellular tissue fluid, or the tissue fluid which was not absorbed by capillary is the lymph, and it passes from small lymphatics or lymph vessel to the large lymph vessel, and ultimately it drains. So what does the lymph must be containing? The lymph is nothing but the tissue fluid is there, okay, then it is containing the fat droplets, large molecules of the proteins which cannot be absorbed, and large droplets of the fat which cannot be absorbed by the blood capillaries. It is absorbed by that of the tissue. Now I mean say by the lymph capillaries. It may also contain the lymph, the cells which may be bacteria, virus, or it may also contain, if the person is suffering from cancer, the cancer cells. Okay, so ultimately large molecules which are not absorbed by the capillaries, blood capillaries, are absorbed by the lymph, and that is the constitution of the lymph. That is the constitution of the lymph. Okay, we will learn more about the lymph in the next video. Second component of the lymphatic system is the lymph capillaries. Okay, as we have seen here, see in this diagram, intercellular space which is filled with the tissue fluid is here is the lymph capillaries are present. They are blind-ended and they absorb this lymph tissue fluid. Okay, I mean so the tissue fluid, interstitial tissue fluid, okay, and forms the lymph which flows into the small lymph vessels. The third component after the lymph and lymph capillaries is the lymph vessels. Then this lymph starts flowing into very fine lymph vessels which join with each other by the tributaries, will join and will form the large lymph vessels. You can see in this diagram where this person is standing, and in the lower limb you can see there is these are all small lymphatics which will join with each other, where this pointer is moving to form the large lymphatic vessels. And while these lymph vessels are running, okay, there is the presence of the lymph nodes, this dot-like structure near the knee joint which you are seeing. They are called as the popliteal lymph node. Then there is a group of the lymph node at the root of the thigh or the lower limb, and these are called as inguinal lymph node. Then the third set of the lymph will pass through the third set of lymph node which are lumbar lymph node, and ultimately then large lymph trunk will form, which is here called as the thoracic duct. It is called as in this way. Ultimately the lymph will drain into the at the root of the neck into the veins, large veins. Okay, so this is was the third component, the lymph vessel. The fourth component is the lymph node. Okay, so I said that these bean shaped structures here, they are the lymph node, and lymph has to filter before it drains into the lymph vessel here by this bean shaped structure called as the lymph node, which we will learn in great detail in the next video. Okay, so this is the fourth component, but this only the lymph node is not the organ through which the lymph is passing, but there are other lymphatic organs, and these lymphatic organs other are spleen, and that is the thymus gland. So spleen, thymus gland, and the lymph node are the organs of the lymphatic system. But then these are encapsulated organ, that means they are surrounded by the capsule, so they are defined as organ. But then this lymphatic tissue or lymphocytic collection which is non-capsulated, okay, not in the form of the organ, is also present in various other organs of the body. Say for example, in the intestine the lymphoid tissues are present in the forms of Pierce patches. Our tonsil which are present in our throat, they are also the lymphoid tissues. Okay, lymphoid tissues, where there is collection of the lymphoid tissues or lymphocytic collection is there. So this just completes the introduction to the lymphoid system, and we will learn in more detail in the next video. Thank you very much for watching the video, and when I will come for the next video, I will cover all these components: lymph capillaries, lymph vessels, lymph node, and lymphoid tissue. Thank you again for watching this video.